You've heard the thing about the frog. The frog in the pot of boiling water doesn't get out because when you turn up the temperature gradually, it doesn't notice and gets boiled alive. Well, actually, no. The frog it gets boiled alive because nobody will pull it out of the boiling pot of water. That's why.
This is a show about jewelry, why we wear it, why it matters, how it's made, and what it means. I'm Alex D, and I turn cannabis into gold. I make mind-blowing jewelry in gold, silver, and platinum from cannabis plants here in Canada for stage, screen, for people who want to rock crazy jewelry. I'm the cannabis goldsmith.
Oh my God, it's like 3 a.m. I can't sleep. I'm up. I did an edible before I went to sleep a few hours ago. So here I am in full edible effect in front of the microphone, being unable to sleep. Normally, when I get up in the middle of the night and can't sleep, I'll have a cup of coffee and go back to sleep. But I've had 3 cups of coffee now, and it hasn't worked. So I'm up. I'm wide awake. And why am I wide awake? Because it's, oh, fuck. The world is just a massive, insane thing. And, oh, man, I guess it's all sort of building and getting to me. That's why I'm here at 3 a.m. talking into the microphone with no show planned whatsoever, no theme. So the theme today is I can't sleep. I guess part of the problem is I am so plugged into news, and I don't want to talk about politics on this podcast because it's an art podcast, it's a design podcast, it's a podcast coming from an artist studio in southeastern Ontario, and I've wanted to avoid talking about politics on it for 88 episodes. But the American election is in 3 weeks. And, even though I can see the United States from my window here across the river, I'm not close to the States. I'm a Canadian, but still I am so fascinated with U.S. politics. And it's going to be, whatever happens is going to have a huge impact on Canada and Canadians, So I am focused on that, and I'm reading everything. I'm watching everything. I'm watching 2 wars. I'm watching the Ukraine war. I'm watching the war in the Middle East. Our political situation in Canada is completely batshit. It's batshit crazy. We have, we have members of our parliament under the influence of foreign governments who the prime minister won't investigate or name. So inside our own house, we have freaking foreign agents. We have the Indian government apparently killing people in Canada that they don't like. But people with diplomatic immunity killing people in Canada they don't like. Now, we have a prime minister who's absolutely the most disliked person in Canada at the moment, and he just won't go. He won't resign. He won't leave. He thinks he's the savior of Canada. That might be why I can't sleep. Just the sheer turmoil that I've tried to keep out of the podcast. Okay, I'm not going to keep it out of the podcast. Today it's in the podcast. So I'm thinking maybe if you let a bit of air out out of the balloon, it won't burst. Because with all this politics fucking coming at me from the States, the world, and Canada, Not that it, and I guess people ignore it, but I can't. I mean, I have to be aware of everything. Like as soon as I got up at 3, I immediately checked podcasts to see what was going on in the U.S. election. Hacks on Tap, which I recommend you listen to. This is super inside. It's a Democratic-leaning podcast. Political operatives are basically doing this podcast in the States, and they are. It's an excellent podcast, and I listened to that this morning, and they're all terrified now that Trump is actually winning the election, and Harris is not getting any traction. She's hit the ceiling apparently, as of this morning's Hacks on Tap podcast. So I'll put a link to that to them in the show notes. Check them out, and you'll get a kind of you'll hear the panic in the voices today. But anyway, what else? Oh God, I listen to BBC World Service. I check because there's a war going on in the Middle East. I'm checking Al Jazeera, J-Post, Haaretz. I think that's how it's pronounced, and Yediot. I think that's how that's pronounced. The 3 Israeli papers in English that I can understand. And then, of course, Al Jazeera to get another side of that. France 24, I get a European view of, that's not from the UK. It's from Europe. And I get a view of the world from there. So I check that. Then I check the AP, Associated Press, so I'm aware of that, what's going on there. And then in my brain, I'm comparing all these different accounts from different sources and different media platforms, and then developing kind of a view of the world my view of the world of what the hell's going on. And maybe that's why I'm up at 3 a.m. because, oh fuck, I can't remember it being this nuts ever in my life, right? Like I'm an old guy, and I've been around a while, and it's never been that nuts either in Canada or, well, maybe the FLQ thing in Quebec was nuts in the 60s, in the early 70s. It was very kind of, in Quebec, it was kind of, it had a similar feeling. But no, this is all over the world. It's just everything feels like we're the frog, and nobody's going to take us out of the pot, and we have to get out of this freaking pot. Otherwise, we're just going to boil. So that's what it feels like to me. I don't know. It totally sucks, and it totally sucks for the creative process too. The news. Oh, fuck. I am so hooked. To it. And now I'm trying to filter out the misinformation in it, the propaganda, to try and glean some sort of idea of what's really going on in the world. And it's harder and harder to do. Twitter, X or whatever the fuck, I'm on there, and I find hours go by. If I just turn it on, I guess it's becoming more like TikTok, right? This kind of mind-numbing content fire hose that's coming at you, that you sort of zone out and then just end up doom scrolling. Luckily, I don't have it on my phone. And one thing I did was, when everyone else was getting on social media, I was not. I was getting off social media, kind of. I was not having it on a phone. I was putting in friction between it and me to slow me down, because I know if I get on it, that's the end of it. Like, I was on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, I've said here, because I have friends around the world, right? And they're on Facebook. That's why I'm on Facebook. It's nice to be able to connect to people through it as a communications tool. But I've been getting lots of spam, and I don't even view the Facebook Reels on Facebook. I don't use that functionality. But I saw a picture of a marmot and in my feed, and I clicked on that, and 3 hours later, I was like, I had watched marmot videos for 3 fucking hours. That is like the 3 hours. Okay, marmots are adorable, and you can watch them where I could for 3 hours. I could watch them all day, actually, standing on their hind legs and eating apple slices. Like, pretty much this is what they're doing in these videos. And then the videos started changing, and people, they seem to be coming from China, these videos. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't seem to be AI generated. It seems like actual live marmots, but people are bringing them into their homes as pets. And you can see these animals are just not happy, right? And they have these long, kind of stained yellow teeth that they use to eat the apple slices. And they never show on the Facebook Reels the marmot like biting into the owner, just to say, take me back to the wilderness where I can dig a frickin' hole and go underground with the other marmots. No. They want to play cute music and make a little TikTok kind of video of a reel with the marmots sitting there with a little hat on. Or, like, Jesus, take the frickin' marmot back to the wilderness. I had a marmot in my backyard when I lived in Toronto. They even live in the downtown cores of cities. Like, I was shocked. I had this marmot. Like, all the lower leaves of my 4 weed plants started disappearing, and then lettuce, and then other vegetables I was growing in the backyard. And I thought, what the fuck? And then I saw it. It's a big marmot, and it was like I think it lived in the neighbor's yard or under the neighbor's shed. But I had to put a fence up around my vegetable garden to protect from this marmot, to protect the veg from the marmot. I put a camera up there to take pictures of them and stuff remotely, automatic video, kind of to capture them on video. There's a guy on YouTube who is the master at that. And I mean, it's the marmot. You'll see these marmot videos, chunk, whatever he's called. Anyway, you'll see it. But, or don't even go there, because as soon as you start watching marmot videos, it'll be like 3 hours later, and you'll say, what the fuck? I've just wasted 3 hours watching marmots chewing apple slices. But at least marmots make you feel good when you watch them chewing the apple slices. The political stuff doesn't. The political stuff is absolutely terrifying. It's like, all this shit is going on. The country you're living in seems to be coming unglued and unstable. Whether you live in Canada or the United States or Europe or in the UK, everyone has this shared feeling now, I think, that their country's falling apart, and the world is actually falling apart. And this is going to be a real consequential time in history. Something has to be done. The frog has to get out of the pot somehow. And if it's not going to jump because it can't, because the walls are too steep of the pot, we have to help get the frog out of the pot. This is what I'm thinking. Or the frog is definitely fucked, right? So anyway, that's all my thinking here on edibles for the first 15 minutes of this podcast on watching the mayhem around me. And it's impacting the art production too. It's like, it's so hard to produce art when the world seems to be about to blow up, right? The world seems to be in this absolute state of insanity. And now I know this is the best time to make art, and this is the best time to, supposedly, to do it, because it's the antidote to all that stuff, right? It's the antidote to all that stuff. But it's so hard. Anyway, today, once the sun the sun rises, I'm going to go out and chop down the last plant. I've got two plants that are curing now. I've got one plant that's hanging, and the fourth plant is in the ground, and that's going to get chopped today. I've left it late. It's the Congo plant. It's huge plant now, but it's tipping over. The whole plant is turning purple and blue in color. All the leaves that are on it. It's at the end of its life. I planted it February 14th, Valentine's Day, from seed. It's a Congo seed from Ace Seeds, and a few years old too. It was like 5 years old when we legalized in Canada. I bought it, and it was an old seed, and I planted one last year, and it turned out great. But I don't think I let it go long enough. So this year I let it go an extra few weeks, and it's out there now. But it's raining today, and that's no good for weed plants this late in the term. So because they rot, the buds will rot and stuff. So you don't want that because it ruins the crop. So what I'm going to do today is go out there and hack it down and hang it up to dry, and then once it's dry, trim it and cure it, and then that'll be my supply for the year. That'll be for myself, for my edibles, and for my arthritis. But leaves on this last plant, no leaves whatsoever. The leaves were just horrible. Like, I couldn't use any of them for jewelry. The leaves had a kind of a warped surface on them. But definitely a genetic defect on this particular plant. But the flowers are normal, It's just the leaves looked weird. So had no value for jewelry, this plant. So let's hope it turns out okay in the other areas. But anyway, so, to get out of this political rut, I've been working on the plants and working on the land and the property here, trying to ground myself out, to ground out some of this stress that's just building and building and building. You feel it. It's like, it was like the last. It was like the Trump term. It was just relentless. Every day there was some new fucking insanity you had to deal with. Every day it was relentless. And I'm in Canada and it was relentless. I can only imagine what it was like in the States. But imagine another 4 years of that, right? But I think the danger as a Canadian looking over the river here, I'm thinking, what if it's the other way? What if Harris wins? And what if the other side is not happy? What happens then? There's all kinds of what ifs that are looming over the river here that I'm looking at, and I'm thinking, God, are the Americans going to be pouring over the border here, coming into Canada just to escape whoever wins? If their side doesn't win, they're all moving to Canada. This is the first thing Americans say. Oh, I'm moving to Canada. Hold on a second, Americans. Maybe we don't want you to move to Canada. Hey, think about that for a second. We have some choice in the matter, We're a sovereign country here, so we can decide whether we want you to come to Canada. But unfortunately, our government just has opened the borders right up here, and pretty much anyone can come to Canada now, and has been coming to Canada. So as long as this government seems to be in power here in Canada, if whatever side wins the election in the States, it looks like you'll be coming up here with us here in Canada. Anyway, and that's okay. If you can handle the temperature, the coldness, and the niceness of the people here, you'll be fine. Well, we're a welcoming group, usually. As long as you participate, you're welcome. And participate in the growth and the beauty of Canada. You're welcome. Come. So I expect that there'll be, I I don't know. I don't know if it'll be post-apocalyptic after the election, but I think it's going to be pretty messy down there in November across the river. So this is why I'm watching with some kind of trepidation, but also fascination. It's just fascinating. It's like a car. It's like during the Trump term, Canadian journalists would refer to the United States as like a train wreck, watching a train wreck, right? Like it was so fascinating to see from up here. But no, we've had enough train wreck. That's enough. We have our own train wreck here in Canada going on, and watching it is not fascinating. It's just annoying. It's fucking annoying. It's hard to do art when the news won't comply. The politics won't comply. The politicians, they're not complying. I mean, we need to make art. We need to make art. Art is the antidote to this whole thing. If we can just get back to making art and music, we'll be fine, you know? But no, it's all about land, power, money, AI, tech bros, batshit crazy space billionaires. It's just become, it's become like a giant chat room, pretty much. Hasn't it? So the goal here is, if you can't tell already, the goal here is already, The goal today is to harvest that last plant, and it's massive, and it's pouring rain. It's not going to be a pleasant task, but I'm going to do it, and that will take my mind off the politics and off the crazy shit that's going on in the world. Now, if you're wondering what happened to the red squirrel from last week, who was either trying to set up his new property, his new digs in my attic, and I turned on the music. I turned on the speaker, this huge JBL speaker, PA speaker that I have with a 15-inch woofer in it, and you know, it has a 1,000-watt amplifier built right into it, and I unloaded an entire iPod of music of thousands of tracks at this squirrel in the attic for a week, and he hasn't been back. And yesterday, you know, I've been turning down the music, so it's bearable now in the house, but he hasn't been back, so we'll see if that's driven him out. Maybe he's decided, he said, fuck this, I'm gonna set up in the pine tree outside where it's quieter. Well, that's what I hope anyway. But if not, I'm calling the pest control company, because I gotta work in here too. The sun is not even close to coming up yet, and I'm wide awake now, still high, and from edibles, from my nightly edible, and after 3 cups of coffee. My God, this day is going to just be interesting, I think. Anyway, so all the news I read today so far looks pretty bleak. So nothing's going to happen good today in that respect. Part of me wishes I could unplug from the news so that I could just be like these people that I know who don't watch or listen to the news at all. I don't have a television. I don't watch television news, you know, so I'm not getting that pumped at me. I can only imagine what it's like in the States with these hundreds of millions of dollars these parties are spending on advertising. I mean, it's coming at Americans from every portal, you know, from TV, radio, whatever, posters, billboards, people knocking on doors. I can only imagine how intense it is. And there's 3 weeks to go. God, I don't even know if we can last, Canadians can last 3 weeks more of that shit down in the States. It's just crazy. We have our own one coming up any day now, or next year at the latest. So we have our own election to worry about. But, you know, God, it's so fascinating to watch you Americans. But at the same time, it's so terrifying. It's just like, oh, God. Anyway, this has been my edible ramble. And the moral of today's podcast is don't start watching marmot videos on Reels or TikTok, because you'll be there for 3 hours watching them eat apple slices. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I guess I try not to bring politics into this podcast at all, but here it is. Today I failed. I brought you politics in this podcast today. And Facebook, thankfully, they don't deal with podcasts, but they would block this because they don't want politics on their platform. Hopefully this would be the last of the politics on this podcast. But there's 3 weeks more to go on this election. And Jesus, I also check the odds, the betting odds on who's winning. So I'm getting media sources from around the world, from Canada. I'm getting the American sources. I'm getting podcasts from the political operatives, the back rooms. So I have an inside look at the U.S. political situation. Unfortunately, we don't have very good podcasts like that in Canada. It's all our media has been corrupted by the current government. I mean, they either pay the media here, it's state funded, or it's suspect, or you wonder if it is state funded. Are they state funded or are they not state funded? And which part of their stories are state funded? This is what I always wonder when I look at Canadian media. So when I'm looking at our own country here, I often look outside Canada to see how other media are seeing us, because it seems to me to be a different view anyway. I won't say more honest view, but I'll say a different perspective on us. And I think Americans perhaps could benefit from doing that too, although I have a feeling that they're not really one to be doing that. But to look at how other people see them is key. And I mean, it's always nice to see how other people see you, isn't it? Anyway, that's obviously I'm starting to sharpen up here as the podcast ends at 28 minutes or whatever. Anyway, I apologize for the absolute randomness of today's Marmot Edible podcast. Next week, I'll be back with a subject to talk about. How's that? And in the meantime, look at the show notes for what I look at journalism-wise, for news, for capturing news around the world, for getting different perspectives on news stories. And then if you have any suggestions, send me an email as to what other news stories to check out, whether other news platforms around the world to look at to get additional perspectives on the news, because I always like having multiple perspectives on every story. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to have a huge breakfast, get carved up, and then put on my rain gear and then take that plant down. It's at the end of the dark cycle, which is the ideal time.
The Cannabis Goldsmith is produced by Tribe Communications, Inc. in the Thousand Islands area of Ontario, Canada. You can see what we do at tribe.ca. Send us an email, alexd@cannabisgoldsmith.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Cannabis Goldsmith.